Thanks very much, James. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike O'Dowd-Jones. I'm one of the lead officers of Peninsula Transport, STB, so we cover Somerset, Devon, Plymouth, Torbay and Cornwall. My day job is Commissioner of Highways and Transport Services for Somerset Council. So I'm pleased to be chairing this session on international gateways. Just a little bit about international gateways first. So obviously these are very key for dealing with the flow of people and goods across borders between the UK and the rest of the world, and therefore crucial to helping sustain our national prosperity. They also have a growing role, I think, as major employment centres in the regions in their own right, so they're really important. And we're very fortunate to be joined by directors from two of the UK's key international gateways, Gareth Powell, who is Managing Director for London Stansted Airport, and John Chaplin, who is Director of External Affairs and Special Projects at Bristol Port. So they will give us an overview of the importance of their operations to the UK economy, the importance of good regional and national connectivity, and hopefully touch on some of their work in decarbonising key aspects of their operations. Just as a reminder, in case you've forgotten, the Slido code is STBC23. I'm sure you know that by now. So please do put your questions on there. So first up, I'm going to introduce Gareth. So Gareth was appointed Managing Director of London Stansted Airport in October 2022. He joined from Transport for London, where he spent 19 years. His most recent roles were Deputy Commissioner and Chief Customer and Strategy Officer. And during his time at TfL, Gareth was also Managing Director of Surface Transport, Chief Operating Officer of London Rail, and Director of Strategy and Service Development for London Underground. So I think it's fair to say Gareth knows a bit about transport. Prior to TfL, Gareth worked for Atkins, started his career as a customer operations graduate trainee for Thames Water. So big round of applause for Gareth, please.
Thank you. The full CV, fantastic. Well, look, good afternoon, and it's great to be here and to be talking at a regional transport conference all about international gateways. And as has just been said, having spent so long focusing on integrated transport within London, it's great to be able to come and talk a bit about how we might do better at joining up internationally within our regions and nationally. So first up then, a little bit about Stansted Airport. So Stansted Airport is one of the big four airports in the country. It's currently third by passenger volume. Heathrow and Gatwick are the two biggest, and our sister airport at Manchester is about the same size as Stansted. It was the fastest recovering airport in the UK post-COVID. It's a major base for Ryanair for low-cost point-to-point travel, has the biggest European network of any of our airports in the country, but also long haul as well, double daily flight over to Dubai with Emirates, for example. And it's in a very strong growth phase. We've seen a really big rebound in demand for international passenger travel. That won't surprise many of you. Lots of people not going on holiday, lots actually of people working in this country whose family couldn't visit them, and lots of inbound tourism into our regions and into London. So we're forecasting to be at over 28 million passengers this year, which will be about the same as we were pre-COVID, with a very strong growth trajectory after that. And the good thing about Stansted Airport from our perspective is that we've got space to grow. We've got space on our runway, and we've also got planning permission to grow up to 43 million passengers a year, which gives us the only major airport in the London system with that capacity to grow. But also, it's important where we're located. So the great thing about being part of the London system, the biggest aviation market in the world, is that that gives volume to strike new routes. But of course, we're based in the east of England, and we have a really, really important role to play to be the gateway for the east of England and to make sure that we can play our full part in delivering value to that region. But it's not any good really talking about growth unless you address the kind of aviation elephant in the room, which is about sustainability. It is, I think, one of the hardest sectors of transport to decarbonise. the technology is a real challenge for aviation fuel. So the aviation sector, and particularly airports, have started where they can in reducing their own emissions, as you would expect, and Stansted Airport is at the forefront of that. We've made some really good progress in reducing our own emissions, and we will be progressing towards net zero over the next few years. We're very excited to have a solar farm coming into construction this year on our site, and that will be about 14.3 megawatts, so enough for sort of almost 5,000 homes if you put it in common currency, or on a sunny day to power the entire operation of the whole airport campus. And that will give us not only energy security, which everybody today needs, given the volatility of pricing and so on, but it'll also give us a very powerful on-site generation capability to add to the region and the UK's overall ability to move forward towards net zero. Also, as part of the Manchester Airports Group, which we are, we're very proud to be a founder member for the Jet Zero Council, which is coordinating both the UK and the international efforts to take all of aviation to net zero by 2050. And the roadmap for that, well, there is a roadmap, but the challenge is, of course, unlike buses, where I've come from and elsewhere, we don't have technology at hand. So the interim step will be sustainable aviation fuel, which takes about 80% of the carbon out of its life cycle. But the UK does not yet have an ability to gear up fully to produce enough sustainable aviation fuel. So a big focus for the industry is about working with partners regionally and nationally to make sure we can create and coalesce the right conditions for investment in SAF plants so that the industry can then supply it in the UK, which itself will create jobs rather than relying on airlines getting their fuel from abroad. So regional connectivity is really important to an airport like London Stansted. It's important not only for us, which I'll come back to in a moment, but it's important for the economies around us. Stansted is the single biggest single-site employer in the east of England, something around about 13,000 people working on site in a variety of different industries, not just for ourselves in terms of supporting passengers and airfield operations, but for private aviation, for cargo, for a whole range of different industries, and indeed manufacturing and maintenance plants that exist on the site that we have. It supports somewhere in the region directly of about 1 billion GVA and about sort of 14,000 jobs if you take those just off site. But as it says on the slide there, total economic impact for you, all of the indirect benefits of about 8.5 billion GVA, supporting 135,000 jobs across the supply chain. So it's really important for the region that we're connected. We need to be connected because of the huge volumes of passengers and the huge volume of freight that we carry. One of the surprising facts that I found out when I was thinking about coming to Stansted is that it takes about 13% of all of the UK's cargo, a very big FedEx, UPS and other cargo operations on site. And that's really important because those types of goods that come by air as opposed to by ports, as you hear about in a moment, they're very fast moving. They're the ones that have to be there just in time, the parcels and so on, and also supporting the growth of life sciences and elsewhere in our region. We also know that the growth of Stansted Airport is going to be linked with the industries and the routes that we can attract. So one of the studies we've done working with partners in Cambridge, looking at the biosciences in Cambridge and all of the spin-offs that are companies that are growing so rapidly there in advanced manufacturing and bioscience, looking at what the value of a corridor created between Stansted Airport directly and Boston over in the US, one of the biggest markets for those services and also for, of course, talent to come over and inward investment to come over. And having done that, we know that we are really confident that there is a massive inward benefit if we can start to support long-haul routes like that are relevant to the industries locally, as well as being important in capacity terms to support London's growth and the UK's growth overall. We are, of course, not only an airport, but we're a regional hub, very large amount of bus services, coach services, a rail station right on site, and so our ability to connect up people's journeys is also very relevant and something that we want to expand on as we move forward. But really, the kind of importance of our connections in transport terms can't be understated. One of the things that the airport is really proud of is the fact that pre-COVID, it had 51% share of onward travel was by sustainable modes. And that's the largest of any major airport in the UK. That was fantastic. We slipped back post-COVID to about 43%, largely because the rail services were reduced, and it's still here. But it was an absolute challenge. We are committed to get back to over half. To do that, actually great support regionally from the SDB and others in lobbying to get 4 trains an hour back onto the Stansted Express, which we have managed to do in the railway peaks in the latest timetable, and we continue to focus on having an all-day service at 4 trains an hour. Because if any of you have wanted to go and catch a flight by rail, you'll know that the last thing you want is for a 1 cancellation train to give you a half-an-hour delay, put so much stress into your journey, really puts you off if the railway's unreliable. So we want to have a really high-performing, turn-up-and-go railway service that everyone can rely on. Of course, that 4 trains an hour is from London. We still have a very infrequent service coming down from Birmingham via Cambridge, which we're focused on trying to get government to improve. It's not just about that, though. We have very, very big coach services from a number of providers, the biggest one being National Express, and actually really good, therefore, onward connectivity. And we're looking to expand what we can do on active travel, which you can have bike shelters and so on, although it's not a big thing for our customers. Of course, it has massive importance for our employee base. And with so many employees coming to and from the airport, it's really important that both that and bus journeys are really joined up. So what is the opportunities? Well, the opportunities are to create more bus services for those working in the airport. We've had a proud tradition, I think, of working locally with providing, I think, an additional 60 bus services over the last 20 years through the transport levy that we put on our car parking income that then goes to public transport. But there's much more we can do there. We need to be integrated in ticketing. We're the only London airport that doesn't have Oyster and contactless yet, although we're promised we'll be able to do so in the next couple of years. We want to produce EV charging infrastructure on site, not just for customers, but also for taxis and, of course, for our employees too. And then finally, there's the potential of East West Rail coming to Cambridge South to better connect up our northern catchment area and make sure that the airport can be fully integrated. So I think, in conclusion, there's an awful lot to be gained by thinking of a large national asset like an airport as part of a local region, but also as part of the connectivity and the economic dividend that it can bring. And I really look forward to discussing and hearing your questions about how we can do a better job at doing that. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Gareth. I just wanted to say a few words briefly before we move on to John about the STB's role in international gateways. Just to mention that we, as we've talked about quite a bit in this conference, we have an important role in terms of gathering information and evidence, pulling together that evidence based on that business case for what's going on in our region, and then understanding the issues and barriers and helping to overcome them. So the STBs together have generated a number of international gateway plans and strategies which are already out there, and the Western Gateway and Peninsula Transport one is coming soon, largely finished, so watch out for that. But a very important role there, and something I hope to explore in a minute with our guests. Moving on to John. John is a chartered engineer and fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers. After working in consultancy and contracting, John joined the Bristol Port Company in 2000. He was promoted to the position of Director of Engineering in 2003 and subsequently to the Director with responsibility for external affairs and the delivery of major schemes. So John has managed an extensive range of projects for the port. He's the Port Company's agent on various national and regional bodies and represents the port in their dealings with neighbours, central and local government, and stakeholders, including National Highways, Network Rail, and the National Grid. So a great person to be talking to the STBs about international gateways. So, John, if you'd like to come and give your presentation, a big hand for John.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honour and a privilege that Bristol Port is representing the maritime side of international gateways. Thank you for that. For those of you checking your emails, that's always what I'm going to talk about. But I have the greatest job in the world, as far as I'm concerned. But there is, as was mentioned in one of the previous panels, a certain freight blindness. In terms of Bristol Port Company, then in the beginning of 1990, the Bristol Port area was owned by Bristol City Council. They were operating a substantial port at a significant loss, being supported by the ratepayers within Bristol, but they privatised the port at the end of 1991, and we became the Bristol Port Company with 2 shareholders, and we are essentially a small family business operating an international gateway. And from 1991, 32 years later, the landscape of Bristol Port now looks like this. The important figures here are, I guess, we are a nationally significant, important asset. The Bristol Port Company itself employs 550 people, but there are 12,000 people employed across our 2,600-acre estate. And a recent study by Oxford Economics identified that 22,000 people in the UK are dependent upon Bristol Port for their living. One of our USPs, if you can have more than one USP, is that we deal with an eclectic range of cargo. We deal with about 750,000 motor vehicles each year coming in and out of the port. It's about 30% going out of the port, so JLR and Minis manufactured in Oxford are exported from Bristol Port to the Americas, both North and South America, and to the Middle East and Far East. Break bulk, we deal with containers. We deal with about 300,000 boxes each year. Felixstowe deal with 4 million. Nevertheless, we're an important regional provider of containers. Added value services, so we have a warehousing division who operate for a number of parties. Dry bulks, so aggregates, and every pig, chicken and cow anywhere south of Birmingham will have been fed by animal feed that comes into Bristol. Liquid bulks, so we deal with about 25 to 30% of Heathrow's jet fuel, and ground fuels are imported to Avonmouth and serve the local supermarkets with petrol and diesel. Project cargo, we are the muster port for EDF's construction of the Hinkley C nuclear power station, and we also deal with a few crews, which is just cargo with attitude. Bristol Port is incredibly well connected, and of all of the major ports within the UK, we are probably the best connected in terms of movements on the strategic road network, both north, south, east and west. You can see our links there in blue. We also have rail freight connections to both Avonmouth on the north side of the River Avon and to Royal Portbury Dock on the south side. And it's important to point out that we also deal with an awful lot of liquids, as I've mentioned. So pipelines connect Bristol to Heathrow and a number of other airports. And in Avonmouth, we have pipelines connecting to local tank farms. For those of you that are reading the Sunday papers and certain speculation, then we are just up the road from the gravity site at M5 Junction 23, which may well be of particular significance in the very near future, hopefully this week. We have a number of customers within our immediate hinterland. So this is the area known as Avonmouth Sevenside Enterprise Area. It includes NDCs and a number of RDCs for all of the major supermarket chains from Tesco, Asda, Coop, etc. There is an Amazon fulfillment centre, and all of the boxes that are provided to the range have come via Bristol Port Company. And then just going through the work that we do and our particular multimodal facilities. So we have road freight, which clearly works very well in terms of end-to-end journeys. As I say, Bristol Port very well connected to the SRN, but we remain very reliant upon the local road network for a number of the cargoes that go to the local region and beyond, and clearly for our staff and customers. Rail freight, we used to have the highest proportion of any port in relation to rail freight, but following the government's decision that we would no longer import power station coal, we are no longer dealing with the 6 million tonnes of coal, but we continue to deal with aggregates in the area, containers, incinerator bottom ash, And actually, we import manufactured trains that come from Spain on car carriers to Bristol and then are taken either by train or directly put onto the tracks and driven off. Sea freight remains interesting, as we will have discussed earlier today, but is clearly a port-to-port connection. We take aggregates and other building materials from Bristol Port by sea down to the Hinckley Sea site, where they have both a facility to take abnormal indivisible loads off barges and to the site, but also aggregates and cement, and all of the ground fuels that we import in terms of petrol and diesel has actually been brought to Milford Haven by big ships and then comes to Avonmouth on smaller ships. And just as a note in relation to active travel and public transport, we do have a bike user group within the port. We have a number of electric bikes that we've encouraged staff to use, so our police, rather than actually use a van to drive around, now use electric bikes. But it remains incredibly challenging for, I guess, all ports to encourage more active travel, given that we are dependent upon ships that come in all states of the tide, and therefore we need people to turn up at 3 o'clock on a Sunday morning or at midnight on a Friday in order to be able to deal with our vessels. We remain confident that hopefully we will be net zero by 2035. Where we can, we are already converting our plant and equipment, so we are rolling out electric vans for staff, including our police force, operatives and the marine department. For those pieces of equipment that are suited to electricity, we will do that, but it remains challenging for those large pieces of equipment as to which way we go. Is methanol the answer? At the moment, it's all diesel and HVO, but we are trialling at the moment, and the little facility that you can see in the bottom right of your picture is a facility that actually produces hydrogen. It squirts it into the engine of one of our dredgers, making it far more efficient. It was noted during the first session this morning that the Midlands engine is by far the best of all of the local regions, so I'll take the opportunity to point out that Bristol Port is by far the best of all the major ports in the region, indeed in England. And not only are we the port for the Peninsula and Western Gateway, but we are surely the closest port to the Midlands engine. But for those of you that are interested or have other priorities, then there are other international gateways, and United Kingdom Major Ports Group represent Bristol and 8 of the other major ports in the UK, with British Ports Association representing the others, should you wish to research or just speak to me. But thank you all for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, thank you very much, John and Gareth. So there's time for a few questions. Quite a few have been coming through on Slido, and some clear themes emerging. So I think we've got time for 2 or 3 questions here. I wanted to take the chair's advantage and just ask you a quick question first myself. So for both of you, what can subnational transport bodies and government, government is in the room as well, what can we do to help your organisation realise its full potential?
Shall I go first? Great, yeah. Thanks. So, I think as is a theme today and a theme generally, I think the challenge and the thing that helps a big site like Stansted do is actually having joined up policy making and the ability to have a stable planning environment. Stansted is a privately held airport. It has long investment cycles and the ability, therefore, to be able to plan and invest in a way which then is sitting within a firmly established regional set of policies and a firmly established set of national policies is really important. I think at the local level, I might just have one more, of course, it's the integration, actually principally of transport, that is the thing that will enable a large passenger airport like ours. And without that integration, we can't get our colleagues to come and work, and we can't get our customers to and from the airport sustainably. So that integration of that transport system is probably the single biggest thing that drives the airport forward from a regional perspective.
Great, thank you. And John?
Thank you, Mike. I'd echo those remarks, but add to it clearly, as you'll be aware, that actually the Western Gateway Subnational Transport Board, working with the Peninsula Transport Board, has done tremendous work in relation to freight, which has very much encompassed the kind of activity that Bristol Port undertakes, even considering coastal shipping and short sea shipping, obviously together with freight and road as well.
Thanks, John. So a couple more questions for you then. I think sticking with John, it occurred to me, looking at your presentation, there's very heavy reliance on the strategic road network. And so there's opportunities and challenges there. So firstly, in terms of opportunities, do you think there is something, given the scale of your operation and the amount you use the strategic road network, is an opportunity there to support the country in rolling out alternative fuels for freight? Is there anything that you can do to sort of support the national effort, as it were?
Yeah, we're seeking to do that, both Bristol Port Company itself, together with a multitude of our customers, many of whom will be known to the sector, such as maritime transport. So we're looking at the options that are available to them. But we are fortunate within our region to have a very close working relationship with National Highways, seeking to address how best we can deal with some of the issues that we have in our area, including congestion.
And just on that point, this is one of the Slido questions, the impact of congestion on your operations. Is that a significant problem for you?
It's fortunately very limited, usually to a Friday night during the summer when the M5 southbound is blocked, or at least very slow. But the benefit we have is that we can adjust the flows of traffic in and out of the port to suit that. So all that happens is that, we don't let cargo out of the port between 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock on a Friday evening during the summer.
Thank you. So I think the questions for Gareth really are more around, I guess, the environmental impact of your operations. Quite a few questions have come through on Slido relating to that. So the first one was an interesting one. France has obviously introduced some restrictions, or is talking about introducing restrictions on short-haul flights, where surface transport, rail, for instance, is a viable alternative. Is that something you think the UK should follow suit on?
Well, it's interesting. So I was trying to think about this. I thought this question might come up as I was travelling up. I was trying to think whether there is, in fact, a domestic flight from Stansted that could be done by rail in under 2.5 hours. I think probably not. And I think what I would say is that the UK doesn't have that much by proportion of domestic flights. It's not a big thing, and they tend to be up to Scotland or perhaps overseas to Ireland and down to the southwest. I'd also say that the UK does rely very heavily for some of its international connectivity on places like Manchester and Heathrow, and some of the domestic flights are connecting into those. And then finally, the other perspective on this is for other regional airports across. Of course, it's really important for them to be able to be connected into markets. So I think it's a really challenging policy area, and I think we don't have quite the high-speed network that France has point to point, as we all know. So I think it's probably less of an issue for us than it is for them.
Okay, thank you. And then finally, I think we've got room for one more question. Obviously, some questions on Slido about the environmental impact of growth. We're talking about your sites, I think both of you, as being great opportunities for regional employment and for regional growth, but that comes at a cost in terms of perhaps the environmental impact. So just how are you managing that? And is there more you could do you think, to manage that as you go forward?
Well, it is a massive challenge. I mean, for aviation, as I said in my remarks, it is one of the biggest challenges that the sector has. And the sector is extraordinarily focused on trying to reach net zero. It's just that the technology in batteries or hydrogen doesn't exist to be able to get an airliner into the air. So the question is, should we not be flying? Well, international trade and international connectivity is based on that, as are a number of economies, both in the UK and globally. So the challenge we've got to face is, well, how do we get there quicker? And that can only be done in the short term through an increase in sustainable aviation fuel, and it needs the right policy environment to help that come to life. But also in technology join-up, and we're working really hard with a number of organisations to incentivise the investment into zero-emission flying. In terms of onward travel and in terms of other environmental impacts, of course, the big focus is to make sure we're integrated into public transport. And I think that is the opportunity that airports have, as well as decarbonising our own direct impact. And then finally, on the kind of noise and what it's like to live around an airport. Well, of course, the technology in terms of planes is getting quieter and quieter. Many airports have restrictions on the amount of noise that they can undertake overnight. And I think every airport, and certainly Stansted, is very committed to making sure that its overall noise impact, as it grows, remains at least constant, if not reduces. And that's an opportunity you have through the technology and the new planes that are coming on at the moment.
Great, thank you. And John, obviously, some of the images that you showed about the growth of Bristol Port and obviously potential future growth, I would imagine, possibly some landscape impacts there and land take. Any thoughts about how that can be managed?
Absolutely. I could do a whole session and repeat about how ports, and in particular Bristol, deal with the environment. We have an environment and sustainability team, albeit it's only 2 people. Nevertheless, as a statutory harbour authority, we recognise that we have a responsibility to look after our environment within the 2,600 acres of site that we have. More than 600 acres of that is dedicated to the environment, with a network of wildlife corridors within the site, and even areas, and if you looked at a port map, you'd find a site called Vole City, where we're working with Avon Wildlife Trust and Bristol Zoo to reintroduce voles, now very successfully, into the environment. A part of our site known as Chittenden Wharf, we are rolling out with Natural England as a site for salt marsh within our local area. So we recognise our responsibility, we are delivering it, and we will, as I say, seek to reduce our carbon footprint, both under Scope 1, Scope 2, and indeed Scope 3.
Great, thank you. So I think that's all the time we've got for questions for you. Thanks for answering those and for giving us your really valuable insights. It's been a fascinating session for me, and I'm sure for everybody in the room. So if we could give a quick round of applause, please. Thank you.